another call. Can we settle for the poster session? So we're gonna, in the next 30 minutes, we'll have a poster presentation from Rwanda, Kenya, Bolivia, Zambia, and Uganda. Could I invite Fred Sabiti and Ivan Gasangwa? I don't know who is taking us through the poster. Ivan, you are ready? Okay, I think you come in front. Then Musa Kathanje from Kenya, and Catherine Kalasha. Catherine, thank you. From Bolivia, Sofia Espinoza. Thank you, Sofia. Very quick, yeah. From Zambia, Brian Musonda. And then from Uganda, Sam Mugume. Ivan. So we start with you. I'm assuming yeah, okay. It's not very visible, but yeah, over to you. Tell us in 5 minutes, what is your 3 key messages?
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Good afternoon. So my name is Ivan Gasangwa. I work for the Rwanda Forestry Authority, which is an agency in the Ministry of Environment. And today I would like to also share with you the 3 key messages that the moderator just mentioned on the natural capital account experience that we are doing, what we're doing here in Rwanda, of course, in partnership with the World Bank, Ministry of Finance, and the National Institute of Statistics in Rwanda. So, in partnership with the World Bank, we are working into supporting the integration. I hope you can see the poster on your screens. So, yeah, supporting the integration on the nature capital account into the climate and environmental policy context in the country. And the very key highlight messages, you find that some of the few questions or objectives that we are looking at is, the very first question was, how can actually natural assets contribute to the post-pandemic economic recovery in the country? As you all know, we have had the pandemic and quite a lot of other things, other activities and businesses were put at hold. And so one of the activity that we're doing was to actually establish an economic recovery, nature-based tourism business recovery plan. And we had to establish a plan, and this is something we wanted to do so that we can track back the nature-based tourism that was booming in the country, and it has been employing around 1,328 jobs, mostly women, giving jobs to those communities. And apart from just that, we were also looking at what can this actually contribute in the management and the restoration of ecosystems. Talking of the hazardous wastes that are into the environment, this is also something that was being looked at. So the second one was actually the way of integrating the wealth accounting into the macroeconomic frameworks. This, as you can see on the screen, you see on the second part of the poster, find there is the most vivid colors there, the blue, green, and red colors, establish the indicators, the adjusted macro indicators of different indicators, including the human capital, the nature capital, that are contributing to the green GDP of the country. And some of the sources and information that were used were the nationally available data sets that were used to estimate what is the trend of the natural capital that is being depleted. As you can see on the graph onto your right, you find that the green color, that is a nature depletion that has been decreasing across the years from the 2019 all the way to 2022. But you find that in the 2020, there has been a halt of all these depletion, whether the natural capital assets that were being depleted because of the pandemic, obviously. So the last point is now the integration of the economic service, ecosystem services into the implementation and of investments into the landscape restoration and management. So we have seen that based on the data sets and the information that was provided, find that if you use or we use the models that are already existing, the business as usual models, for instance, we have had soil erosion across the country, 45% of the landscape being on the, at high risk of erosion. But then if we now start considering all these depletion, use of the management of ecosystem, and it is taken into account, then we can start reducing the amount of, because we have the data, we have information, we know what is being depleted and where it is happening. We can start now tracking these numbers and figures going down to from 30% to maybe 20% of the soil, the metric tons of the soil that is being washed away within the soil in the erosion. So there is quite a number of things that we are doing, and this is a work in the progress that we are also improving the data sets, the mechanisms and the frameworks through which we get the information so that we can update and upgrade and can be integrated in the natural capital accounting. So I would leave it there, and we will have, we were having a poster outside. If you have more detailed questions, I can give you more detailed information as well. Thanks. 5 minutes?
Thank you so much, Ivan, for highlighting those 3 points. I noticed, colleagues, by the way, we have translation from English to French. So, because I noticed most of us or none of us are using the translation facility. So, if you are more comfortable in French or English, please use the gadgets for translation. We have very good colleagues there that are doing a wonderful job translating. Okay, Catherine, what are the 3 messages from Kenya?
Thank you so much. I don't know if there are 3 messages, but I'll give the 2 policy questions that are responded to in this session. So first of all, let me first thank you very much for inviting us to come over here to share what we are doing in Kenya in incorporating the natural capital into our frameworks. So when we look at the poster, I can be able to illustrate what we have been able to do so far. That is with the assistance of the TTA support from the GPS, that is from the World Bank. So I'll address 2 main questions. The first policy question was, what is the impact of climate change on the Kenyan economy? So the key activity we conducted in addressing this policy question was to integrate climate consideration and ecosystem service consideration into the macrostructural model that was used in the CCDR for Kenya. So what did we find when we did this analysis? So what this analysis did, it was trying to see how adaptation measures of climate change can be able to mitigate the effects of climate change on our GDP. What we found is that we did two different adaptation measures. That one of them was on, let me look at this one, was on reducing labor heat stress, and the other one was related to landscape restoration. From our analysis, it was evident that when we did adaptation measures on landscape restoration, they had a greater impact in mitigating the effects of GDP, on climate change on GDP. So, and again, using this scenario, it was able to see that more of it was on crop production and rainfed and erosion. Those are the ones which were being mitigated the greatest. So what this also showed was that on landscape restoration, the adaptation measure also had a great impact in reducing poverty. This goes hand in hand because agriculture, that is crop protection, leads to food security, and also it's one of the important employers in our country. Like agriculture contributes about 21% of GDP. So you can imagine how many people are being employed by agricultural sector. So it had a great impact on reducing the effects of GDP on the landscape restoration had a great impact. The next thing we looked at was the change in total soil carbon. Again, it was evident when we did landscape restoration, then the top carbon, you know, that is what is caused when we have soil erosion. So, but when we did restoration, that means that we do afforestation. So that means there was no topsoil loss was reduced. And with that, we also had a great impact on poverty reduction. So those were the two results we got from that analysis. And moving forward, what did we learn? And the greatest key message that came from that analysis was that it reinforced the importance on investing in the adaptation actions while modernizing agricultural practices, and that will accelerate Kenyan transformation. Now, what are we doing moving forward? Now that we have been able to get these results, moving forward, we want now to integrate natural capital into our macro model that is used in budgeting process. Already there's been a little work done. We have been able to use the QCraft model with the assistance of the IMF to be able to construct what happens, different climate scenarios, their impact on the fiscal sustainability. We have been able to do that. But moving forward, we want to use the remainder of the TTS support from the GPS in order to liaise with the National Bureau of Statistics so that they can incorporate the natural capital into the national account. And with that, it can be able to be used during budgeting. Because from the national accounts, that's where we get to be able to model how budgeting is going to be conducted. So that's what we are targeting to move forward. Now, the next policy question that that is addressed with the post and what we are going to use the natural capital, what is happening in Kenya, is how does landscape restoration impact biodiversity and cultural ecosystem services? So the key activity we wanted to do is rapid assessment of how change in land cover impacts the biodiversity and cultural ecosystem. Mostly this was targeted to look at tourism-based value addition. What happens when you do not do anything and climate change impacts your landscape? What happens when we compared 2018 to around 2050, what will happen to our land? We saw that most of the land, agriculture will most likely almost vanish because of what we have, deforestation and all those practices. And also the tourism sector will be greatly affected because what will happen is wildlife will disappear. Then the natural, like for example, we have in our country we have sites like Masai Mara, Amboseli National Parks. All of those will disappear if we don't do anything to mitigate the impacts of climate change. So in our analysis, we saw that if we do land restoration, actually the revenue we get from tourism, that is the, what do you call it? The value of tourism will more than double. That is, it will increase from around $1.5 billion in 2018 to around 2.6 billion. You see, that's a lot of money that we'll be losing if we don't do anything. So those results are what is driving, and actually that will be based mostly on the natural land cover. That's what is going to impact more on the value addition. So that's what we got. I know there is a lot of information still. If you look at the poster, there is a lot of information. Any question you'll have to ask, I'll be available to answer any questions you might have. And I really appreciate the moments I've been given to be able to just give a snapshot on what we have in Kenya. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that applause. And I see a thread, actually, from what Ivan presented, looking at nature-based tourism and landscape restoration. I see a very good common thread that's coming up. So next we go to Bolivia. Sofia, the message from Bolivia.
Thank you very much. So from Africa to South America, I think I'm the only representation from South America. Well, let me tell you a little bit about this area that we focus our study. Is the Chiquitano Dry Forest. This is an ecoregion that we share with Brazil in Bolivia. This is the largest and best preserved tropical dry forest that we have in the world. But it's under a great threat to agricultural extraction, and which is expanding every year. And we have other conflictive development activities there as well. This forest, which is a very, very interesting landscape, is home of a rich biodiversity we have there in Bolivia that includes different vulnerable species like the giant armadillo, the endangered giant otter that we have there, and the near-threatening Maine wolf. So I work in an NGO, Conservation Strategy Fund, and we basically do economic analysis for environmental and development problems. So we really know that environmental conservation and sustainable economic development can be possible together and actually mutually reinforcing if we accurately account for nature's values in our decision making. So we basically provide information through different studies that we do to policymakers and politicians in Bolivia and in the region. In this study, we basically focus on analyzing the ecosystem benefits of the Chiquitano Dry Forest and estimated the economic value of those benefits to provide to the local community in Santa Cruz, which is a region that we have in Bolivia, which the Chiquitano Dry Forest is settled. The results of the study were used to inform the regional government of Santa Cruz and further work supported by the World Bank that included several territorial plans in 39 municipalities that we have in the Department of Santa Cruz. So the information that we provided through this study was very useful to those territorial plans that are going to be implemented next year for those municipalities. From our key findings in the study, we found that our environmental valuation says that 1 hectare of the Chiquitano Dry Forest can provide more than $4,000 in economic value to the region. And this is considering only some of the ecosystem services that we were able to evaluate, since we based on secondary information and we didn't have enough information to include all the ecosystem services that this ecoregion really has. We identify key areas to prioritize in conservation efforts where ecosystem services are valued as the highest and most at the risk. So we identify those areas to say the government to protect them and avoid the increased of agricultural areas in those very important protection areas that we should take care of. Agricultural expansion in this ecoregion is unavoidable. It's increasing every year. It's a truth, we know. But it can be made more sustainable with regenerative practices. These regenerative systems are activities that are going to be implemented next year. It's kind of new in Bolivia. We are trying to implement these activities like recent years, but it's known that it has better opportunities to reduce deforestation in this region and other regions that are threatened by deforestation activities like agriculture. Local communities can diversify their income streams to protect forests with increasing sales of non-timber forest products, but also with timber forest products. In this ecoregion of the Chiquitano dry forest, the timber and non-timber forest products are very rich, and many communities live with these resources. Actually, the non-timber resources are very, very useful for women that are leading the use of these resources and selling and gaining some additional incomes for their families, which is really beneficial for the women of those local communities. While the Chiquitano dry forest is considered outstanding for the many environmental functions, we think this ecoregion faces an uncertain future. Our hope with this kind of study that we provide is that the region will build a strong case for the forest preservation in future decision-making processes by local governments. We have the regional government there that is implemented some of the recommendations that we share with this study, and we have also local governments with the municipalities that are going to take into consideration our results that we found in this study. Thank you.
Okay, a round of applause. Yeah, thank you, Sophia. I didn't have the chance to see your poster, so I'm looking forward to come and see what is there. Okay, now we move over to Zambia. Brian.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Well, for Zambia, since I've got little time, I'll just say 3 takeaway points. That's coordination, capacity building / decisions, and then also mainstreaming. On coordination, the whole program of natural capital accounting for the country was pegged at a high level, which was being guided by Ministry of Finance and National Planning. And some of the policy questions that we sought to answer as a country as we developed this program was to check, are the current land and water and forest management practices conducive to sustainable and resilient growth of the country? And is Zambia making the most of its natural capital? So from this, when we looked at those, we constituted a technical working groups from ministries. The idea was to coordinate them as they develop these. And I think the World Bank also did provide, and the UN, means of capacity building the first members that were identified. And after they learned, the development of the accounts was quite fast and it was quick. We selected land, water, and forest as pilot. And the results that came from those reports that we did for the first time were quite glaring. For example, in the forest, all along we thought urban settlements were driving deforestation, only to discover it was actually agriculture, and at the faster rate land was being cleared. And interestingly, it was actually most in the rural areas where we thought it was actually less, and that was due to farming practices. And also urban settlement was coming in second. And when you look at water, Zambia prides itself as a country that has enough water resources, but the idea is that no one has ever mapped how much groundwater resources there, and that could, once we reviewed the findings that came out from the account, it actually helped to see how we can sustainably manage water as a resource, both for social and economic reasons. And when you look at the forest, and when you look at the land account, it actually showed us the land usage over time, as the forest also showed that most of the land was being used for agriculture. We also noticed what was happening around industry. Sometimes mines would do their mines, open pit mines, and those lands would be left like that unused. And because of that, we thought, how best can we address what we are finding in these accounts? These results were quite telling. And one of the things that we thought was to develop an overarching policy for the country. So we proposed something that was done for the first time, was to put this in the national plan. So once we're developing at the 8th National Development Plan for the country, we decided not only to put environmental as a strategy in the plan, but we put it as actually a pillar, more like a national strategic goal for the country. We termed it the Environmental Sustainability Strategic National Development Goal. The idea is that everything that had to do with environmental accounting, natural capital accounting, was put in that. The idea was to coordinate efforts to ensure that whatever was being done was being reported on and decisions were being made on policy level. And what this has done is that I think from the land, water, and forest account, we've actually updated them from the first iteration reports. And further on, we've gone to add on another report, I think it was mentioned earlier several times, the wildlife and protected areas account. And we want to add further on the energy account, the minerals and mines, and even the fisheries. The idea is that once you have proper coordination, there's capacity that is built in the implementing ministries, and these results that are coming out are able to reach the policy makers, the decision makers, like we've done in Zambia, where there's a steering committee that has been functional, that is yet to be made so functional. Once this steering committee is able to see these results, they're able to inform policy, and once that policy is there, it's able to drive change. And just to come back on the forest account, there was something interesting that we discovered once we were doing those results. It was the idea that there are other forest products that were actually generating revenue for the local people. The idea that we've always believed is that it is difficult for the local people, the rural people, to conserve the forest if they don't see the benefit of doing so. So once we impress that on them, and we see what those forest products like beeswax, like honey, we develop sub-accounts on them, and they see the value of that, we have actually found that there's that propensity for them to want to conserve the forest more, and they're able to see the results for doing that, and that's the story for Zambia.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brian. I'm racing against time here, so I'll move quickly to Sam, just so we hear what is happening in Uganda.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. And unfortunately, you're racing against time, but I'll take a short time. For starters, the poster is outside, and I would like you to visit it when you come out of here, because very, very, like all my colleagues' posters, they're outside, you should visit them and see. My story is simple, to tell you about natural capital accounting, a journey that we've taken as a country from 2017 up to the current day. Definitely with our support from our partners, the WEBS project, and GPS support, and others. So this is a simple journey, and it's been very, very interesting. But why did we take this journey? One, like the two pictures you see on the poster, on the right-hand side and the left-hand side, Uganda is gifted by nature, heavily endowed, and its people and economy heavily relied on natural capital. So policies that we wanted were more in sustainable development policies, and we wanted to know exactly what is the contribution of natural capital towards economic development, and also what is the impact of economic development as regards natural capital utilization and depletion. In simple terms, we wanted to go beyond GDP. Just measuring that we've produced so much and we have reached so much, 50 billion USD as our GDP is not enough. But to know how much, when we are producing that GDP, how much we are losing in terms of natural capital. And if we use 50% of our natural capital, how much GDP are we generating and happiness? So these are questions that we wanted to answer, and we answered them by producing accounts. We produced some accounts here, which I will name for you that you'll see. One of them we looked at, we had the lands account, and you see, when you go to the graph, to the poster, you look at the graph. I will not talk about the graphs. That's your homework for today. Please look at you'll see what is happening. Number two, we did the wood assets and forest resources accounts. We did the physical and monetary ecosystem services and asset accounts for Uganda. This is the most recent one. We valued our ecosystem services, and this has helped us to inform our policies. From these accounts, we've done a number of things. One of the, we've had policy briefs coming out to inform our policies. For example, we had briefs that helps us in development on National Development Plan 3. In that development plan, we have a whole chapter. It's a program on environment and climate change. As a result of this, as a contribution of our natural, the briefs that we made, but importantly, we also had, before we went on, we had to make sure we get a plan for natural capital development and preparation in the country. This plan is in existence and it's helping us going forward. This was with support from GPS. And we had our capacity developed. When you look at the picture in the middle of the three people standing in with a lady from, there's Minister of Water, there's National Planning Authority, there's Forest Services, and there's Minister of Planning, and then our NSO. We developed a technical working group that is helping us keep natural capital accounts being informed. After the accounts were developed, we said that we are trying to use them to inform policies. One of the things that we're doing is to have what we call the adjusted macroeconomic indicators report annually prepared to inform on what is happening. This is going beyond GDP. There are a lot of things we did, and GPS and the WAVES and the World Bank and partners have helped us reach here, but we are not going to stop there. We need to do more. For example, the adjusted macroeconomic indicators report, government has taken up this and is funding it as one of our plans. We need support when it comes to NSO, the Uganda Bureau of Statistics, as far as the data concerned, generation of data, generation of accounts. So I'm saying this because I want to tell GPS and others, World Bank and the rest, that we thank you, but we need some more. I thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Sam. And Sam has given us an assignment to go and check the graphs. But I see, actually, I see some threads on this integration with national development plans. I see you've done it in Zambia. I see it's also in Uganda. I see this technical working group providing for this interaction between different sector ministries and finance and planning, which I think sets a good stage. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Thank you to our panelists. We've really benefited and been enriched in knowledge from your presentation and sharing your country experience. Can we give them a last round of applause as they leave? And just to say, you're all invited again to do a gallery walk because the posters are outside. Thank you so much. So we would like to switch gears to the final session of the day, session 4, high-level panel discussion on the topic of leveraging natural capital, accounts, and evidence to inform biodiversity policies. I would like, again, to take this opportunity to welcome back Valerie Hickey from the World Bank, who is going to moderate this high-level session. So, Valerie, welcome.
Thank you so much. And I think before we all leave, we have to give Phil a big clap for really keeping the energy high in the room. And I do want to invite my co-conspirators on this panel up to the stage. Let me introduce them as they come. Old age, I need my reading glasses to get this right. We have DG Beatrice Sisa from the Environment and Climate Change Department in the Ministry of Environment in Rwanda. Welcome, Beatrice. We have the PS Daphne Chabu from the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources in Zambia. Come on up, Daphne. Thank you, Beatrice. We have Director Moses Kagwa, who's the Director of Economic Affairs at the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development in Uganda. Thank you for joining us, Moses. And we have PS Engineer Festus Ngeno from the State Department of Environment and Climate Change in Kenya. Please come on up, PS. So we've spent an incredible day listening to all of the data that all of you have been collecting and sharing these past few years. And indeed hearing how much this data is actually driving decision-making, which at the end of the day is what matters. If we want to prove that growing fast means growing green, we need the data to prove it. But data is also necessary for decision-making. And that's what we want to spend this afternoon doing. Because many of us remember in the 1990s when Robert Costanza came out with his very powerful economic paper talking about the fact that ecosystem services were worth $33 trillion to the economy. And nothing happened. You know why? Because the journey between data and decision-making runs through champions like you all, champions like we have on this stage. And it's been amazing since the discipline of environmental economics has been around since the 1960s. And we've seen the sophistication of environmental economics and natural capital accounting really emerge in the last decade. We've also seen champions emerge. And what's exciting is these champions are not just coming from Ministry of Environment. They're coming from Ministry of Natural Resources, from Ministry of Finance. Since we are standing between you and dinner, let's quickly put hands up. Who is here from Ministries of Environment or Climate Change? Hands up. Okay, not so much. You know what? That's a good thing. Because at the end of the day, natural resources, when we talk about it, it isn't just an issue for the environment, it's a whole of economy, whole of society issue. Who's here from sectoral ministries, Ministry of Lands or Ministry of Agriculture, Ministries of Mining? We have some of those folks here. What about Ministries of Finance? The people who hold the purse strings. So remember, when you go for dinner, and we are going to stop at 5 on the dot, go find the Ministry of Finance people, because we all need more money and they hold the purse strings, they have the budgets. But what I want to do with this panel is have a conversation really around 3 questions. Why are they champions? Why are they doing this? Why are they interested in using data for decision-making to drive green economies and not just try and find random green projects? How did you do it? How did you convince people? We heard about the power of communications earlier today. And what's next on your agenda? What's the next frontier of thinking in this space? But before we start, I do want to invite P.S. Ngeno to come and frame the issue for us. He is such a champion in Kenya with his entire department. And it's worth listening to how he's done it and what they're working on. Over to you, P.S.
Thank you so much, Valerie. Allow me to make some few remarks in regard to the questions that Valerie has asked, and allow me to observe the protocols that have already been set since morning. Engineer Festus Ngeno is my name, the Principal Secretary, State Department of Environment and Climate Change in Kenya. It gives me pleasure to join you all here today to reflect on how data on capital and ecosystem services could be leveraged to align to national biodiversity strategies and policies to support the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework. And historically, there has been a challenge of reconciling development, especially the economic growth and environmental conservation, mainly because of our economic measures of progress, which is largely through the use of gross domestic product as the GDP as the indicator of economic growth. And this process, therefore, does not fully consider nature's contribution to human well-being and the impacts, whether negative or positive, of economic activities such as infrastructure development or deterioration of environment. Further, this standard economic measure of the gross domestic product can be misleading, particularly where the goal is to protect and promote social well-being across generations. Ladies and gentlemen, to address this challenge, the concept of sustainable development was presented by the World Commission on Environment and Development, otherwise popularly known as the Brundtland Commission, and the Commission defines sustainable development as follows: that the development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. To guarantee well-being across generations, it is recommended that governments should measure inclusive wealth as a measure of societal means. And inclusive wealth is the sum of the accounting values of our produce capital, human capital, and natural capital. Reason being, change that enhance social well-being raises inclusive wealth, while those whose change diminishes social well-being are known to reduce inclusive wealth. We should therefore strive to achieve inclusive wealth for a better society. In our report, Our Common Agenda, the United Nations Secretary General urged member states and others to begin the implementation of the System of Environmental Economic Accounting, the SEA, and the System for Population and Societal Conditions, and to consider existing complements or alternatives to GDP, such as the Human Development Index and the Inclusive Wealth Index. Ladies and gentlemen, it is gratifying to know that the international statistical community developed this international statistical standard for natural capital accounting called the System of Environmental Economic Accounting, the SEA, which is an integrated framework that shows the relationship between the environment and the economy. SEA brings together economic and environmental information in an internationally agreed set of standards, concepts, definitions, classifications, accounting rules, and tables to produce internationally comparable statistics. In Kenya, for example, the National Bureau of Statistics has been collecting and disseminating environmental data on water, energy, forestry, through the economic survey and statistical abstract publications and other high-frequency releases. They use the Framework for Development of Environmental Statistics, FDES 2013, which structures environment statistics into components, subcomponents, topics, and statistics. However, the data has not been fully integrated as structured in the System of Environmental Economic Accounting, and rather as a silo approach for each sector has been applied. Data on physical flows is also not captured according to the SEA framework, and this limits the use of the data to inform development agenda and decisions making with an environmental accounting lenses. Kenya started work on SEA accounts in 2017 and developed the first pilot energy accounts in 2018 with assistance from the United Nations Statistics Division. And the country has since then been producing these accounts on an annual basis and has prioritized the development of water, forestry, mineral, and ecosystems accounts in the draft national plan, with the current focus being on water accounts. However, a whole natural ecosystem coverage is yet to be achieved. Kenya is also currently reviewing and updating its national plan for advancing environmental economic accounting, because it recognizes that for it to proceed with the next phases of developing environmental economic accounts, it is imperative that it secures a buy-in from producers of statistical information that will feed into the SEA framework. We are committed to keeping the momentum and achieve compliance status at the earliest opportune time. Ladies and gentlemen, the Kunming Global Biodiversity Framework was adopted during the 15th meeting of the Conference of Parties following a 4-year consultation and negotiation process. This historic framework, which supports the achievement of sustainable development goals and builds on Convention's previous strategic plans, sets out an ambitious pathway to reach the global vision of a world living in harmony with nature by 2050. Amongst the framework's key elements are the 4 goals for 2050 and the 23 targets for 2030. And during the implementation of this framework, I invite all of you to make intentional efforts to integrate as far as possible and as appropriate the conservation and sustainable use of biological diversity into relevant sectoral and cross-sectoral plans, programs, and policies. Such biodiversity mainstreaming seeks to ensure that the multiple biodiversity values are duly taken into account in decision and policy making for public and private sectors. Target 14, for example, of the Global Biodiversity Framework aims to ensure that the values of the biodiversity are fully reflected on mainstream in all relevant decision-making frameworks. The policies, regulations, processes, strategies, assessments, and national accounting constitute the numerous decision-making frameworks. However, these frameworks often do not appropriately account for biodiversity and its values, including regulations, plans, and development processes, poverty eradication strategies, strategic environmental assessments, environmental impact assessments, and as appropriate, national accounting. Therefore, the implementation of this target of the Global Biodiversity Framework presents a significant starting point for governments that are parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity to mainstream the biodiversity values into their sectoral planning documents across all levels of governance and sectors. The Convention has provided for a comprehensive guidance for the national target setting that interrogates national planning instruments and processes. As I conclude, I urge all of us to make deliberate efforts into investing in assembling a credible data for the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework, which has come with a very weighty responsibility of reporting against over 3 tiers of indicators, which will require baseline data and continuous data to capture progress. Only then shall we plan, implement, monitor, report, and assess the impacts of policies and actions of the Global Biodiversity Framework in an effective way that shall contribute to the decision-making and help secure the natural capital for future generations. I thank you, Murakose. Thank you.
Thank you so much, P.S. Festus. And I think there were 2 things that struck me in particular as you framed this conversation we're going to have this afternoon. The first is how much we have to put people at the center of these accounts. We're here to talk about natural capital accounting. We're talking about the importance of integrating it with biodiversity. But at the end of the day, this is about people. And I think that's really important for all of us to remember. And it's also this idea that I heard from you, and I've heard it all day, that we have to move away from siloing. We have to start having structured accounts that are integrated. So it's one conversation, it's one set of accounts, it's one balance sheet. And I think that's something that we really need to listen for from each other's discussions this morning. But DG Beatrice, I want to move to you next. We've been hearing all day, starting with State Minister Claudine, just how much Rwanda has done when it comes to natural capital accounting, and how much Rwanda really is showing the way in terms of how to grow green and grow fast. At the same time, we've also heard some of the challenges here. 500 people per square kilometer, that could double as much to almost 900 million people, 900 people per square kilometer. So you have a huge land squeeze. You have development challenges. Why did Rwanda choose to use natural capital accounting as a way to try and reconcile some of these challenges, to keep people at the center, to deliver for environment and for development?
Thank you, Valerie. I think you made a good point about the population growth versus the land. And mind you, the land does not grow. It remains the same, although we have the population that's growing. And 65% of Rwandans, they do rely on natural resources for their well-being, for their livelihood, for their resources, including agriculture, forestry, tourism. So that's a huge number of people relying on the natural resources, which means if we don't have the exact account, if we don't know exactly how much is this 65% of the population using, how much do we have, and the projection in 10, 15 years, in our vision 2050, we want to become a high-income country. Will it be possible with the trend? If we keep the business as usual, will it still be possible? So I think this is one of the key push that made Rwanda work on this natural capital account program. And thanks to the World Bank again, with the GPS project, program, we started by 4 pilots, and we developed the accounts for the land, for water, mineral, and ecosystem. And these accounts have been so helpful for development of different policies. And for us, for the land account, as you said, land for us is very dear. And traditionally for Rwanda, land is something that is seen as of a huge value from different population and from different users. So we have developed a land use master plan to guide the way we use our land, being for agriculture, being for human settlement, being for conservation as well, because we have the conserved area, we have also the protected area, we have wetlands. So we have used the land use master plan to establish all those key areas and to go into details to give them different uses of those different areas, and to also kind of set a law that prohibits the use of some ecosystems and also provide how some other ecosystem can be used wisely. So to develop the land use master plan, the land account was very key. The data from the land account were very key to inform the land use master plan. Another one on the water account, this has been so instrumental to bring the reform in the water resources management and governance in Rwanda. So water, as precious as it is used in a cross-sectoral and it's cross-cutting. So we want water in energy, we want water in agriculture, we want water in tourism, we want water in the supply of household industries. So it was becoming really a constraint for us as the government to understand how are we going to share this resource in those cross-sector, how are we going to use it as a source of economy, but how are we going also to spare it from being overused. So with also the numbers we got, with the data we got from the natural capital account, we did the account of water, and this came up with the recommendation on the water governance in Rwanda. And that's how we came up with Rwanda Water Board, which wasn't there before, and it was established to report under the Prime Minister's office. Since it was cross-cutting, for the sector working group, it belonged to Rwanda, to the Ministry of Environment, but due to its cross-cutting nature and use, it was decided to be put under the Prime Minister's office. So this was also one of key and major outcome of the use of the capital account and natural capital account. And also, number of accounts has also helped. The ecosystem account, for example, helped us to understand the importance of the biodiversity. And this has also been used to inform what we have developed, what we call the Rwanda Biodiversity Information System. So the Biodiversity Information System, hosted under the Center for Biodiversity Excellency on Biodiversity and Natural Resources, it helps us to get data, and data to inform what we're going to do as the policymakers, what we're going to do to implement the biodiversity policy we have, to implement the biodiversity law. But I think it also helps us to implement the GBF, the Global Biodiversity Framework. So, because if we are talking, for example, let me pick the 30 by 30 target, it won't be possible to implement if we don't have data. And whoever talks about data, we need to go as deep as to the account, knowing exactly what do we have as data, what is the scarcity, and how can we better decide. So I think with the account, that was the outcome of how we've used the account we did. But also, I would mention that data in decision-making is the backbone. It's the backbone of decision-making. Because to me, deciding without having the recommendation from thorough research data, it's like busy driving and not getting time to get gas, really. So I think, yeah, that was very key for us to get those data, and we are still embarking on this journey, and we still want to continue until we get it as a set plan, which will be now delivering on a yearly basis or on an annual basis or 2 years basis, at least having it something which is tangible and which is trending. Yeah.
No, thank you so much, DG. You know, this idea that it's not just the data, but it's the information system you build around it, the architecture you build around it, that's so important. And how much we don't talk enough about how critical, how much a backbone this data and information is for governance. Because so many of the natural resource accounts we talk about are not single sector. They're shared across sectors, they're fundamental. And governments fundamentally have to decide who gets what piece of it. It's about the distribution of those resources, and they're going to be winners and losers, and not having the data to back that up. You can't distribute something if you don't know how much of it you have. And I think that becomes so fundamental, especially in a country that has a land squeeze, like Rwanda. I know Zambia, PS Daphne, doesn't have the same kind of land squeeze, and yet you've done these protected area and biodiversity accounts. I know in part because the places where the protected areas are places where there are other things, like non-renewable natural resources. And with Zambia at the forefront of the new African gold rush to find the minerals to allow all of us to transition to a more green economy, how much have the protected areas and biodiversity accounts helped think through the governance of some of the land use decisions that you're having to take right now in Zambia? I think this one might work. Oh, you can, of course, you're welcome to stand, of course.
Thank you very much, Valerie, for this opportunity to share Zambia's experience so far with regard to institutionalizing the natural capital accounting. Presently, Zambia is actively, thank you. I was just thanking you for giving me this opportunity to share Zambia's experience so far with regard to institutionalizing the natural capital accounting. Presently, Valerie, Zambia is actively advancing the natural capital accounting through the development of a national strategy, like Brian said. The national strategy for natural capital accounting is aligned with our 8th National Development Plan, 2022 to 2026, which aims to mainstream NCA across government sectors for enhanced coordination and collaboration. We also seek to strengthen investment and commitment to timely production of credible and useful NCA data, support integrated planning, monitoring, and decision-making based on sound evidence. Valerie, the development process of the natural capital accounting for Zambia involved a concept note, benchmarking exercise, which we did undertake with Statistics South Africa, and a clearly defined roadmap. Notably, Zambian government has secured support from the United Nations Development Program, UNDP, the World Bank, and the Worldwide Fund for Nature, WWF, for this very strategic initiative. Now, we have also utilized findings from the Wildlife and Protected Areas account, and the findings are actively being used to inform strategies for nature-based tourism. These insights, Valerie, have directly influenced the Ministry of Tourism, MTEF expenditure framework. That's a medium-term expenditure framework for 2024 to 2026, which have resulted in a 4% increase in the operational budget for our Ministry of Tourism. We've also sought and obtained approval for the recruitment of 342 additional wildlife police officers. This was done in 2023 and has since been implemented in 2024. So we have recruited in the Ministry of Tourism 342 additional wildlife police officers. I also wish to report that the government in my country has allocated specific budget lines for developing general management plans for wildlife protected areas for sustainable wildlife management and nature-based tourism activities. With regard to biodiversity conservation, the Wildlife and Protected Area account findings will be utilized to revise and update the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan through, 1, assessment of the status of biodiversity and associated ecosystem services currently underway under the Global Biodiversity Early Action Support Project, which is funded, as we know, by GEF, Global Environmental Facility, through UNEP. Exploration of payment for ecosystem services is another potential conservation strategy which we are exploring. The utilization of the natural capital account will assist my country in meeting the 23 targets of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, especially, as you recall, targets 2 and 3 on restoration of the 30-30 protection, which Rwanda talked about. In addition, Valerie, our country's commitment to the natural capital account and the utilization of its findings from wildlife accounts showcase a proactive and data-driven approach for managing our natural resources. This approach holds significant promise for sustainable development, fostering a thriving nature-based tourism sector, and enhancing biodiversity conservation efforts. What we have done in Zambia has not been without its challenges, and I want to report on the lessons that we have learned. We have discovered, Valerie, that there's need to enhance data collection through timely undertaking of surveys across natural capital accounting to improve availability of data. We've obviously learned from Rwanda. I'll be sharing notes with my colleague from Rwanda. There's also a need, we've discovered, for a central database for NCA data. Synergies and relationships need to improve and created to smooth the collection of data from its customers. We've discovered that we tend to work in silos, so we think we need to integrate much more. Multidisciplinary and multi-sectoral approach should be taken when creating these NCAs. And we believe NCA should be institutionalized with participating departments, agencies, and organizations. Obstacles: there's need for capacity building and technical working groups across all ministries. There's already a technical working group at my level as permanent secretaries, which we need to enhance, I believe. Need for improved technical equipment also, we think we need help with that. We are talking under there, Valerie, for processing servers and workstations. We do need help with that. There's obviously need to improve NCA awareness of different stakeholders, such as not just the policymakers, but the general public as well. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. Thank you so much, PS. And I'm already beginning to hear some themes come out of our conversation this afternoon. And one is what PS Festus said at the beginning, which is about this idea that we have to avoid silos. And it's so fascinating to see how these protected area accounts, together with the Ministry of Finance, you figure out how you can allocate more domestic budget. And actually seeing the fact that you can increase your number of rangers by 342 people, that's a huge success. That's incredibly important. That is real world data. I think the second theme I hear very much is how important, and DJ, you brought this up, is not just to have the data, but to have the architecture and infrastructure around this. And that we can't afford to have the data sitting on somebody's computer or sitting on a report in somebody's office, that there has to be that digital architecture backed up by the workstations, backed up by the servers, so that this data is safe and can be used and can be accessed. We always talk about AAA data at the World Bank. Data that's available, it can be found, it's accessible, it can be understood by everybody, and it's affordable. Because you want to be able to update these accounts regularly. And Director Moses, this is something that you've done so well in Uganda. You have several accounts, you update them regularly. This is really becoming institutionalized within the Ministry of Finance. And in fact, it's been integrated with some of your macroeconomic modeling, something that really is not an easy thing to do. And you've even used some of the information and the data from the accounts to think about things like green taxes. How does that work? How did you make that happen? I think it should.
I think it's working. As Good afternoon, everybody. And I think I'm standing between you and dinner. So I'll try to be as precise as possible. First of all, we did acknowledge that nature is the most precious thing in terms of poverty reduction and sustainable growth. We identified what we thought were critical aspects of nature and what we needed to do to make sure that we know the monetary or the quantifiable value of those assets. Of course, we also realized that some countries had done it. We didn't have to invent the wheel. And I think I'm appealing to all our other colleagues that we can pick and copy the good examples that our colleagues have been telling us what has happened in Rwanda, what has happened in Kenya. It's something that you can pick up and learn. So, on knowing the importance of data in any decision making, we really had to make sure that we get the data correctly. And how do you do it? It's the same way you look at the other economic data we use in calculating GDP. How do we collect it? The only difference with this one was that it was not really so much of financial data we were going to collect, but we had to understand the nature of the data we wanted. Because if you're looking at water data or forest data, how do you collect it? And yes, what do you actually report? So that which it needed a whole of government approach, the people who are concerned. Because when you're looking at nature, I mean water, for example, you're looking at water for production, water for consumption. If it's for production, you have to look at the Ministry of Agriculture. If it's for just for consumption, then the Ministry of Water must be involved. Then you look at tourism. There's water tourism, so the tourism people must be involved. You are looking at also the Ministry of Energy, because a lot of our electricity is generated through hydro. So all that we needed to understand what we are counting, the importance into the whole landscape of the economy. So because of that, we started sharing and said, yes, this is very vital information, which shouldn't be for only the Ministry of Finance, for example, though we took lead because we are the ones who are accountable for GDP, working in very close collaboration with Uganda Bureau of Statistics and the National Planning Authority. But we said, yes, let's share this information so that people can help in interpreting it and its proper use. So, as you said, we should not be working in silos, but we should be working, and everybody should know what we are actually working for. Because if you're talking about natural capital accounting, some people don't understand. Actually, when I was leaving office, the person I left in to act on my behalf, I told him, well, we have a discussion on natural capital accounting. He's in the Ministry of Finance, and he said, what are you talking about? So I realized that we still had a long way in terms of people understanding what this is. Maybe we should simplify the language, because when people hear about natural capital, they try to understand what it actually means. And it is something that maybe we should think about, and also how we can disseminate this information, not only to the elites, the people who are in the ministries, the professionals, but to go down to the private sector so that they can also understand what we are actually talking about when we're talking about natural capital and what it means for their businesses in terms of sustainability and profitability. We also need to go down to the communities. We've talked a lot about the communities, but do they really understand? Because if somebody is going to destroy a swamp, do they understand the importance of this swamp? And can they attach value on it? If they're going to destroy a habitat of birds, and in Uganda we have about 1,100 species of birds, which is about 50% of all the birds in Africa. And I think, yes, 19% of all the birds in the world. So, but do people understand about these habitats if they want to go and if they destroy them? So it's very important that actually the communities are sensitized to know about the importance of natural capital. Thank you so much.
So much, Director. We have such a terrible habit in the environmental community of talking in riddles and talking in complexity. Many of us were at the United Nations Environmental Assembly last week, and there was an event on circular economy. Nobody knows what that means. You know, try and go to a community and talk to them about circular economy. I think we really do have to simplify and have to start making it meaningful for the people we want to impact. And I think it's not just making it meaningful for the people we want to impact, but even the experts who do this, helping them understand and be thoughtful about what kind of data do we want to collect. It's exactly as you said, Director. How to collect it. How to make sure that when money is being invested to collect data so that it drives decision making, we know what the question is that the decision makers are trying to answer. But I want to do a quick fire round just to finish this off. And I'm going to start with you, Director Moses, and go down along the chain. And I'm going to shamelessly steal from His Excellency President Kagame here in Rwanda, because he always talks about the importance of three things. First is unity, and I think we've heard that theme here today, how we can't work in silos, how when it comes to nature and biodiversity in particular, it's about a whole of government, whole of society, every sector, public sector, private sector. And so we really need to think about that. He also talks very much about accountability, about the fact that data by itself is no good without it driving decision making. And we have proof of concept. You heard here today the specifics of what having good data can do. It can get you more money. It can get you more rangers. And then he always suggests that everybody think big. So that's what I want to ask each of you for and go down the road. In terms of thinking big, what's the next frontier in each of your countries? What do you want to do next when it comes to natural capital accounting, when it comes to thinking about driving the biodiversity agenda in your country? Director Moses, I'm going to go to you first.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes. What are the next steps that we should be talking about? Because we're thinking big. The next steps, first of all, is the whole of government approach, as we have rightly pointed out, to ensure that everybody is on board as far as climate change and natural capital accounting are concerned. And then trying really to make sure that everything we do is going green. We should all be thinking about green from all the plans in the country. I know, for example, that we have, you can't pass a budget of an institution unless they demonstrate that it's gender and equity sensitive. But nobody has been talking about natural capital, that everything that we're doing, we're thinking green, and we are costing all our actions and all our activities, how they're going to impact on the environment. And that is very, very important if we are really to see that the whole of government approach actually does work. You also mentioned the dissemination of information in very simplistic ways and in languages that everybody can understand. Because if people understand that, then yes, we'll do it. And maybe finally, we are going to rally all our plans, all our borrowing and really getting of finances, because we really want to attract financing. We can't do it alone. It's very, very costly. But we want to package the financing of our development along going green, along nature, yes. So that one will help. Not only are we going to help the entire the economy, but we are also going to be working with our partners. The last one, I think, as regions, I think we should start talking about working together. The East African community has 7 partner states, but how are we working together? Because if we do one thing in one country and it's not being done in another one, then we'll not be really looking at I won't call it the whole of government approach, but we should use a regional approach because we need to solve these problems regionally. As some of the facilities, some of the habitats, we actually share all these things across the board. So it's important that we work together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Director. Silos are not just between accounts, they're between countries. So how do we begin to integrate that planning? I think it's so important. And then I'm looking at Bekele and Christian and the team, and I heard some really big next steps. One is we need to do some of this natural capital accounting in local languages. If we're going to explain to local people, how about having it in local languages? Not just in English or French or some of the main languages. And then how do we make all budgets green? Not at the expense of making them gender inclusive, but adding it to it, making them green and inclusive. I think that's something we all have to work in. P.S. Daphne, what about you in Zambia?
How does this work? Valerie, in a way, I'm going to be the devil's advocate here. I want to believe we really have no choice. You know, in my country, for the longest time, we had copper, and copper gave us everything. I was just sharing with somebody how up to maybe 2012, if you graduated like I did at 23, thereabout, earlier than that, of course, the employer was obliged to give you accommodation. So we didn't want for anything. We lived in a rich country. But where we are now, with climate change and all this, do we really have a choice? We really have no choice. We've had to look for options. And I always say, for as long as you're alive, you know, life gives you options. So somehow, this is an option we just have to look at. And we've realized also that people make the most money from natural resources. We didn't think so for a long time. I'll share an experience in my country. We waived, is it visa fees? I think it's the same everywhere. We've had more tourists coming in to see Victoria Falls. So we've realized there's money to be made there. Land in my country is plentiful. If you came to Zambia and asked for land, for the longest time we thought you were doing us a favor. We gave it for free. I'm telling you the truth. I'm PS for lands. I've had to argue with people in meetings. I've said land has value. But the mindset in my country is if you come, you want land for farming, we give it to you literally for free. You don't pay anything for it. But there it is, land is the most valuable asset that we probably have. But we have plenty of it. So our thinking, Valerie, we've had no choice but to realize that perhaps this is the way we should go. And it's making us money, really, you know? So all this is welcome. For us from Zambia, we are lucky. We have buy-in at the highest level. You know, the president is very passionate about this. So that also, I think it motivates us to go this route. We really have no choice. Thank you very much.
No, I think, P.S., you're absolutely right that everything we've been discussing today and what we'll discuss tomorrow and when we are at home, it's not and nice to have, it's a must have. Because there's such a disconnect today between value and price. As you said, for land, the value of land in Zambia is enormous. It's driving the economy, and yet the price is sometimes zero. And natural capital accounting, in a way, is a way to try and make sure that the price reflects the value. And remember, at dinner time, free land in Zambia. So we're all going to be coming to sit with UPS. DG Beatrice, what about in Rwanda? What's the next big thing?
Well, for us, it's like, I'll go for 3 steps mainly. We were talking about translating this natural capital accounting into local languages and what you're saying. So this reminds me about the capacity building from the institutional level, from the individual level, and from the whole of society, trying to make them understand what is this natural capital account and what does it mean to them? What value does it have to us and to all of them? So that is one, or understanding also the nature of the data that we want to collect from the institutional point of view. What kind of data are they going to collect? If it's the Ministry of Finance, as my colleague from Uganda was saying, what do they need to know when it comes about water, when it comes about any kind of ecosystem service that they want to know and they want to collect data? So capacity is very much needed. On top of that, we need a roadmap on how to implement the natural capital account. The roadmap that will set up the priority in terms of policies, priority in terms of programs to unlock and to start implement, priority in terms of what are the key low-hanging fruits where you can start. Is it maybe starting by a payment for ecosystem service into different programs? Is it maybe starting with another kind of nature-based solutions that we can start using the PES? So the roadmap is also one of the key instruments that I see needs to be developed. And lastly, we want to now translate the data into the national accounts. The data we have, wherever we get them from, we need to integrate them into the national accounts, and thus getting them accounted into our national systems, and really knowing what we are using, what we're not using, and what is our green GDP, if I can say. So this is also the next step. So simply put, 3 things. We need capacity, we need a roadmap, and we need to integrate the natural capital accounting into the national accounting systems.
No, thank you so much, DG, excuse me. I think this idea of having broad-based backing for what we do and moving beyond explaining to people why doing the account matters to showing them what the accounts can help achieve, and making natural capital accounting boring again by having it just part of the regular infrastructure and departments of statistics. So it's not something niche, it's not an add-on, it is part of the DNA of decision-making that every national department of statistics does. P.S. Festus, let me hand over to you for the last word. You started us out, finish us off. What's the big idea from Kenya?
Thank you. I would like to associate myself with the comments from colleagues. But the first thing I want to agree with is the language, simplistic language. Even on this matter of climate change, it took our president almost 1 year and deliberately even established the State Department of Climate Change for purposes of communities to understand that the livestock, the rising levels of the lakes, the dwindling forests was as a result of climate change. So I agree with my colleague that this natural capital accounting thing needs to be demystified and made simpler, especially from the statisticians and the guys in Treasury. And it's important for us so that people understand what you are discussing. 2 is, again, and I heard from my sister from Zambia, only when he was doing comments like lamentations, being the issue of financing, which is so critical, and the environmental space has been left behind. Environment, as I look at it, equals to life. But in terms of appropriation, and it is all over. I like my colleagues from Treasury are here. When they are doing the national government budgeting, environment is the last one to be taken care of. They go for infrastructure, that is roads, energy, and education. When they are done, anything that remains, they now remember, oh, there is something called environment. And Valerie, you are aware they want us to do the 15 billion tree growing program, and it is not easy. Rehabilitating 10.6 million hectares of land, it needs a lot of financing. So that is one of the critical issues, that we need to have environment and climate change issue, natural resources issues at the apex. And that is important, that when they are sorted, in fact, we were discussing with my colleagues at the posters there, that if you sort out the livelihood issues, the soft issues of our programming within our environment or in development, we will sort out so many issues of infrastructure. But the problem with our governments, and I know it's a problem across, is that they look at the infrastructure programs, water, roads, and that kind of thing. Lastly is on the whole government approach. I agree, whole society approach, and I would like to give an example of our program in Kenya, the National Landscapes and Restoration Program towards the 15 billion tree growing, that has been mainstream in all the ministries in our performance contracting, that it is no longer a preserve of the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Forestry to do the 15 billion tree growing program for in the next 10 years, but it is also in treasury, it is in roads, it is, so that is one of the key things. I think the issue is how do we then cascade it and make it implementable. So I agree, we sort out our silo approach first even within our ministries, leave alone governments alone, even within our state departments alone in where we work, come to the ministry, come to government, now and then we move to the East African. I think when we sort our issues locally, it will be very easy now to work with the East African brothers in terms of what we need to deliver. So I just wanted to highlight and to confirm that what our colleagues have mentioned is right. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, PS. And both you and the director brought up so clearly this idea that finance is often the forgotten little sister of economics. And yet the two have to be opposite sides of the same coin. Because the accounts can tell us so much. They can tell us why things matter. They can drive decision making. But every decision requires finance to be put into effect. And we can't forget that piece. You know, we heard so much from this fantastic panel this afternoon. We can't do silos. We can't be so specialized that nobody knows what we're talking about, such that we end up speaking nonsense or we can only speak to each other. We have to make sure that in addition to having the data, we have the data systems, and we have the finance to make sure that as we have the data, it drives decision making, that there's money available to make those decisions work in the field, be meaningful for people. And as PS Festus started it out with, make material change in the lives of people, showing that biodiversity in nature is an engine of economic development, is deserving of investment because it generates job, it grows GDPs. But the other thing I've learned as we talk so much about capacity building, as we talk so much about simplifying how we discuss this, is the power of champions. Please join me in celebrating these 4 amazing champions for biodiversity and natural capital accounting. Thank you so very much, panel. And I believe I'm going to hand over to Phil, who's going to let us all go out to dinner.
Okay, another round of applause. You know the drill, I was just checking my updates. Seems like nobody said anything online. That suggests that you all did amazing work. But I'll take that advantage, just one quick thing. I think, you know, as I was hearing the intervention, I think the point that was brought up by Moses about these silos between countries. So Rwanda hosts the ISTEC, which is the agency, the Science and Technology Commission of the East Africa Community, which has actually been working with countries in the region with the National Commissions of Science and Technologies, has developed the regional bioeconomy strategy for East Africa. And as I understand, Now Rwanda is developing national bioeconomy strategies. Uganda is developing national bioeconomy strategies with the support of EAC. So I think there's an opportunity here, because one of the things I struggle with, and I come to this conversation from a really science training, not economics training, is how we struggle with different concepts. For me, if you tell me bioeconomy, economics of biodiversity, natural capital accounting, I think we're all talking about nature and how natural capital can contribute to economic growth and socioeconomic development. But then we segment, then we say, you talk about bioeconomy and go to biosciences and biotechnology, and that's a different pocket. And then you come to natural capital accounting, that's a different pocket we take to the statistics. The other one we take to the National Commissions of Science and Technology. Perhaps there's an opportunity, I think, particularly for colleagues from East Africa. I think the bioeconomy work is really so advanced. That is the second bioeconomy strategy, second regional bioeconomy strategy in the world after the European Union. And I think if we can connect this, because from what I see, the priority areas there is energy, health, agriculture, which we all talked about quite a lot today, and bioindustrialization. We talked about timber and wood products and forestry products. It's all the same thing. So I just wanted to say that, Valerie, because I think we have opportunity to start putting all the pieces together. Okay, so again, let me request you again for a final round of applause to our amazing panelists. These are the champions and the decision makers, so we know we are safe when all the data goes for decision making. We know that we'll just have a tick, okay? And thank you so much, Valerie, also for your wonderful moderation. Okay, so colleagues, I think it's been a long day. I know we are all tired. We are looking forward to a break. But just before the break, I have a couple of announcements here. And please listen carefully, because if you miss what I say, you might even risk missing your flights. And we don't want you to get stuck here, even though we'll be happy if you get stuck, because you'll do the shopping part of the workshop, which we talked about. But one is that we are all requested to confirm our departure time for the flights. So I believe at the back, there's a list there with our colleague Lesia. You can see her, she's kind of raising her hand there. Please go there and confirm what time your flight is departing, so that it can help us coordinate the logistics of airport transfers with the hotel, so that none of you misses out on this. Secondly, for those colleagues that are leaving tomorrow, please make sure you check out in the morning. Thirdly, for those colleagues that have been funded by the World Bank, the GPS program, our colleague Abdu has Abdu, just raise up your hands. Yeah, so please see Abdu there, because I think there's some incidentals that you need to cover, and Abdu will help you sort that out. And then we have some very good news. So I'm informed that each of us, all of us, have a souvenir to carry from here when you go back home. So there's an envelope for everyone. I will not say what the souvenir is about, but I don't know where do we have it. We will get it before the dinner, is that right? Yeah, so there'll be an envelope for all of you. That will be a souvenir to pick and keep from today's session. And the puzzle is exactly find out what is there. And then lastly, and this is something I always look forward to whenever I come to Rwanda, amazing dance and music that's planned for us. Traditional Rwandese dance, that will have, I believe it's outside, the next room, just outside here. So we'll have this dance from actually just immediately break from here, I think, is it? From 5:30 to 6, and then at exactly 6, we now go for dinner. So you're all invited, please don't miss it. If there's one thing you'll never want to forget when you come to Rwanda, is the dance, and you can see how high the dancers here can jump, and really how interesting the traditional dance is. I think I would also like to thank the colleagues who are online. We have had quite an amazing participation from colleagues online, virtually. I'm in the WhatsApp group for the Natural Capital Accounting Community of Practice for Africa, And I can tell you every time something was going on, colleagues are exchanging and talking about how their countries are reporting what they're doing. So the conversation has not just been sort of like restricted to this room. The conversation is actually outside there, even more than we are having in this room, and that's really great. Tomorrow we will have to make you a bit more uncomfortable, because we'd like you to wake up early, because we'd like to start at 8:30 so that we have enough time to go through a very packed program. So I hope that's okay, that we are all into this together, so we all make that sacrifice. Tomorrow at 8:30 sharp, we will be here. Okay, I don't know if I forgot any announcement. Logistics, seems like I get a thumbs up. Good, so have a great evening, enjoy the dance and the music, and I'll see you at dinner. Thank you so much.